It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
These are the final seconds.
The lead in the fourth. Can they hold on to it?
That do or die time. And everything rides on one shot. But it isn't going to be that easy.
And it's a one-point game.
This is down to the wire.
They're going to try the three-point attempt.
One shot to take you to the top. One winner. This is clutch basketball. That's the NBA playoffs. That's game.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Red Sox here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Gabrielle, founder of Girl at the Game. And of course, today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Tell them Locked On sent you. And it is Monday. It's Tuesday. It is Tuesday, March 30th of opening day week. Opening day is 2 days away. We will be back at Fenway Park. I am so excited. But before we get into that, the Red Sox just finished their final spring training game about 15 minutes ago. They lost to the Atlanta Braves 5-3. But overall, a really strong spring for them. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I've got a conversation with my friend Jason Mastrodonato of the Boston Herald that we recorded for you guys on Friday about some of our spring training takeaways and the news that Eduardo Rodriguez would not be opening the season as the starting pitcher on Thursday. But before we get into that, let's just talk for a second about the Red Sox spring. As of yesterday, they were leading Grapefruit League in home runs, runs, slugging, average, and on-base percentage, and they were tied for second in OPS. They had a pretty excellent spring. They won something like 17 games. I think they finished with a 17-10-1 record for that one tie game against, I believe it was the Minnesota Twins. Spring training is over, but it was honestly a lot better than I expected. And I know that these games don't count for much. They don't really count at all. But to me, they count in terms of a preview of what you can expect from certain players and from your team in general. And honestly, they outperform my expectations. I think that the cool thing about spring training is that if your team has a good spring training, they can carry that momentum into the regular season, feeling good about themselves, feeling like they're ready to compete when the games actually do matter. And they can take the good parts of spring training with them. The good news for players and teams who didn't have a good spring training is that it's only spring training and the games don't count, and you can still improve when opening day rolls around. You can leave it behind in spring training if it doesn't suit you, and you can heat up when the games really start to count. And I think JD Martinez is an excellent example of that because he typically has kind of a slow spring training, but then he obviously is a pretty fearsome slugger when the regular season rolls around. I remember in 2018 when he came to the Red Sox and he started spring late because his contract was not ready when spring training began. I don't think he hit a home run the entire spring, but then of course he was making a play for a triple crown in 2018. And it didn't matter that his spring was slow. Earlier this week, I think it was yesterday, he hit his first home run, one of 3 home runs that were hit on Monday against the Braves. It was him, Kike Hernandez, and Marwin Gonzalez. He hit his first spring training home run yesterday. He had a 2-run shot today. He's already kind of ahead of his usual schedule in terms of his offensive contributions to this team. So that's really encouraging to see. And overall, I just feel really good about how this spring went for the Red Sox, even though there are obviously some good news, bad news situations here. You know, Eduardo Rodriguez won't be pitching on Thursday, and Chris Sale is looking more like a later rather than a sooner return from his Tommy John, seeing that as we are only just now approaching the 1-year anniversary of his surgery. But overall, I'm encouraged. They did so much better as a team, especially offensively, than I expected. And I'm just really excited. We have opening day on Thursday, and Cora said after today's game that it went great. He said, I was thinking the last 3 innings watching the kids play, this organization is in such a great spot. The future is bright. And then he announced that the season opening Red Sox rotation, obviously you've got Nathan Eovaldi getting the nod for opening day instead of Erod. Then TBA, it's probably going to be Tanner Houck though, Garrett Richards, Nick Pivetta, and Martin Perez. And Cora says that if Eduardo Rodriguez opens the year on the injured list, it's probably going to be a short stint. Ryan Brazier apparently has a grade 2 calf strain. He will stay in Fort Myers. But Cora said just now on the Zoom call, we're ready to play baseball. We have a good baseball team. He acknowledged the depth of the division, but he said you have to be on point from day one, but to put it in an easy way, we have a good baseball team. And that's really encouraging because Cora's the kind of guy who pretty much most of the time tells it like it is. If the team is struggling, he holds them accountable. A lot of the guys that Bloom went out and got this offseason were guys that Cora really wanted, like Kike Hernandez, like Martin Perez, like Marwin Gonzalez. You know, Martin wanted to play for Cora. Marwin Gonzalez played with Cora in Houston. Kike played with Cora in 2017 and for Team Puerto Rico in the World Baseball Classic qualifiers. It is encouraging to see players come here who want to be here, and it's encouraging to see a manager get to have a say in the guys who he's going to be working with, because that right off the bat is better than just trying to kind of force a situation. This team has a ton of new free agents. People have likened it to the 2013 spring training when Ben Cherington demolished the 2012 team, added a bunch of free agents, and kind of rebuilt it, and no one really knew what to expect in 2013. I'm not saying that this is going to be a World Series team. I'm not that crazy. There's no David Ortiz on this team, for starters. But I will say that even though there were a bunch of seemingly random and some mediocre acquisitions this offseason, I think that Chaim Bloom and Alex Cora are smart enough to find the commonalities, to find the common threads between these players, the links that will help this team be more of a cohesive unit from the jump than a lot of teams when they do a pretty sizable rebuild and have a bunch of players who have never played together. And I think that we're seeing that based on how well spring training went for this team. You know, they were scoring 5 or more runs in a majority of their games. Yesterday, they became the first team in spring training to shut out the Braves all spring. And yes, again, I know the games don't count, but the point is you can take grains from spring training games. You can see glimmers of hope. You can have takeaways from these games. And the takeaways from these games for me is that this team is going to be better than they think. I put my bold prediction on the Locked On MLB Twitter yesterday, and my bold prediction was that this team is going to be better than people think. And I know that that might not sound so bold, but if you're a Red Sox fan listening to this podcast and you've heard me be down on this team for a long time, and rightfully so, in my opinion, this team is going to be better than you think. Now, before I play you a part of my conversation with Jason Mastrodonato of The Herald, let's talk about our sponsor, Rock Auto, for a minute. There are so many makes and models of cars on the market nowadays that it's impossible to stock all the parts you need in a traditional chain storefront. And when you go into one of these stores, you're going to be asked a ton of questions that you might not know the answers to. And then you're going to find out that they don't even have the part in stock for your car. You're going to wait while the counterman orders the parts on their computer, but they're only going to choose the brand that their warehouse happens to carry, and they're going to charge you more money for those parts. The dirty little secret of the auto industry that they don't want you to know is that you're going to be upcharged 30, 50, even 100% for the same auto parts at those chain stores or dealerships that you could be buying on rockauto.com. Unlike these chain stores, rockauto.com does not have different price tiers for professional mechanics and do-it-yourselfers. Rock Auto's prices are the same for everybody, and they're always reliably low. They are a website for everyone. They're a family business. They've been serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. Think about that, 20 years. So go to rockauto.com and you'll shop for auto and body parts from hundreds of manufacturers at the lowest prices. They have everything you could possibly need for those extremely low prices. When you check out at rockauto.com, write Locked On in there, how did you hear about us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
Yeah, you're making sports bets, but are you making winning sports bets? To win consistently, you need an edge. Research, analytics, It's a lot. Or you could let BetQL do the work for you. Every game, every potential bet, from winners and losers to all the sides and totals, line movement, player props, and more. All backed by BetQL's proven data and analytics. BetQL analyzes over 350,000 unique bets every year and rates each potential bet on a scale of 1 to 5 stars. A 5-star is definitely a smart bet. 1 star, smart money is staying away. BetQL even lets you sort all of today's games with the best options listed right there at the top of your screen. BetQL gives you access to the same information the pros use. The stuff the sportsbooks don't want you to see. It's time to bet smarter and beat the books with BetQL. Visit BetQL.com today and use promo code PODCAST for 20% off. That's 20% off with promo code PODCAST at BetQL.com.
You're probably a Red Sox fan if you're listening to this podcast, but if you are a fan of any other sports team out there, or you just want to keep up with the breaking news happening every single day in the sports world, you can get all the sports news you need in under 20 minutes with the Locked On Today podcast. Host Peter Bukowski updates you on the latest news in every major sport with the help of our local experts. Follow the Locked On Today podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get podcasts. It's Friday, March 26th. We are officially less than a week away from opening day at Fenway Park. Fans allowed in the stands at our favorite ballpark for the first time in over a year. And I am joined by my dear friend, Boston sports writer Jason Masterdonato of the Boston Herald. Hi, Jay. You excited?
Hi. I'm excited to watch baseball regularly and try to get a feel for the team that I've only been able to watch like a handful of times in spring training for stupid reasons. So here we are.
So you'll be there on Thursday. I'll be there on Thursday. Were you at the ballpark at all last year?
I was. I went to the first day, and I was like, doesn't feel safe enough for me. Didn't feel like it was worth the risk at the time. We still didn't know a whole lot about the virus, and I was living with somebody who I was trying to protect. So I only went once, and then I stopped going. But it's going to be nice to kind of get a feel for like the team on the field, get a feel for the ballpark. Just no team in baseball needed a fresh start like this one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, last season was just such a disaster that at this point, basically what I have started doing is just not focusing on it. You know, like if we look at people's stats, like if I look at a player's stats, I'm not really looking at last year's stats. I'm not looking at that 60-game season. Like if we're talking about JD Martinez or pretty much any pitcher on this team or most players around the league who struggled last year, I'm just not. I'm going to look at 2018 and 2019. I know that obviously we're already over a year removed from 2019, but it doesn't feel fair to the players who had to play in such ridiculous and stressful circumstances to judge them based on last season. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. I think so. You know, I think baseball kind of took that same stand. If you look at the free agent contracts that were given out, you know, players who were only good last year and not good in previous years, or players who were good in previous years but not good last year, pretty much got the same money they would have gotten otherwise. I don't think there was a ton, maybe with the exception of Trevor Bauer, but, you know, Bauer had been really good the year before too. But there wasn't a ton of players getting paid for what they did in 60 games. And, you know, usually you see guys who have good postseasons end up getting rewarded with money. And I don't know that happened either. So it seems for the most part, baseball is saying last year was an anomaly. We're not going to read too much into it, but that might be a mistake. We'll see what happens this year. I think, you know, there might be some things that we could learn from last year that we take into this year. Obviously the rules are changing a little bit again. There's no more expanded playoffs. There's no more DH in the National League. So it's a little bit different, but, yeah, I think, you know, JD Martinez is a really interesting one because he's used the video excuse so much now where if he doesn't have a great year, it's like, all right, well, now what? You know, now what's the reason? You got your video back. You got the iPad video in the dugout. It's the new rule this year. They can have the iPads in the dugout. They can look at their at-bats after the half inning. MLB will edit it so that there's no catcher signs in there. So, you know, there's a lot of pressure on Martinez, I think, to have a good season, especially 32 years old. I think he's really got to shine this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely seemed motivated to do better this year, and he knows he's on what we say the wrong side of 30, which is kind of ridiculous. I mean, he's only 32 years old. I think he's going to do better. We've seen him have slow springs, though. I feel like every year that he's been with the Red Sox now, this is what, his fourth off season, fourth spring training with the Red Sox, which is kind of crazy to believe at this point. But I don't think he hit a home run in spring training his first year with the Red Sox either. He obviously showed up late because his contract wasn't finished. But I just feel like last year there were just so many outside stressors that baseball players, any athlete, has never had to deal with before. They're isolated from their families. They can't leave their apartments or hotel rooms to do anything but go to the ballpark. Whatever. It's time to move on, right? I think it was Babe Ruth. I'll paraphrase here. I can't talk today. I'll paraphrase here and just say, I think Babe Ruth was the player who said the only home run or the only at bat that I'm concerned with is the next at bat, And I think that's true. Your past World Series championships can't win you another one. Your past home runs can't affect this game. The only thing that matters is what you do next. So right. I'm definitely looking forward to a clean slate.
I feel like, if you think of who's like the poster boy of 2020 for 2021, I think of Randy Arozarena, who was like a nobody until last year and had like this great short season, dynamite postseason. That's a guy to watch. Like, does this continue? Was that a flash in the pan? Was it just like a weird year? So I think Arozarena is a good one for us to pay attention to, especially in the AL East.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for the Red Sox, obviously, that would be Bobby Dahlbeck too, because he made his debut in September, hit something like 5 home runs in his first 8 games. And he's currently leading MLB in spring training because he's got 7 home runs. He hit his 7th last night. That's the most of any player in the league as of yesterday, anyway.
Yeah. I asked him 2 days ago, I said, does it still feel good to hit homers in spring training? Does it feel like you just wish the season would start at this point? And he said, no, it still feels really good. A home run still feels good, whether it's in spring training or not. And so I think that's interesting that it's giving him some confidence. And I think that's huge for young players to get that confidence, even if it is spring training. I mean, he's facing some MLB pitchers. He's in the lineup every day with the regulars. He's hitting at the bottom of the order, which is interesting. That Cora wants to try this experiment with, an Aaron Judge type figure in the 9-hole. But he's getting some confidence, and I think that's really big for young players.
Yeah, for sure. And, people always love to tell me when I tweet about spring training games that they don't count, which, thank you so much. Do you think I don't know that? But for me, I think they count in a way that's different than the regular season. The wins and losses don't count towards your regular season, your records in the record books, but they're the preview for the season. Obviously, the first couple weeks of the games, they're kind of weird because you've got a bunch of totally random low A minor leaguers kind of just playing in these big league games. But as you get towards the end of spring training, like where we're at right now, the Red Sox are playing literally right now as we record. Jeter Downs just hit a massive 2-run homer off the Rays. And you're getting a preview for what's to come, both the minor leaguers that could be making an impact either this season or next season, who might make their debut this season. It's also for the players, like you said with Dahlbeck, yeah, the home runs don't count, but they still feel good. It's setting the foundation, creating a positive mindset, giving you some momentum going into the season. When they finished the season, 2018 spring training, they finished with the best record in Major League Baseball for spring training. Yeah, that record didn't count, but they felt so good going into the regular season, knowing that they were already a good team. And in 2019, you saw the opposite. They struggled in spring training and people were like, oh, it's just spring training. They'll warm up. It goes both ways. And no, they didn't really warm up. Those struggles were actually a sign of what was to come. And that kind of stuff I look to kind of get a vibe from the team. And on the plus side, yes, those games don't count. So a team has plenty of time to turn it around, but you're still getting a look. Players are getting their knocks in, hopefully. And so for Dahlbeck, he's going to be on the opening day roster. He'll probably be playing first base a lot for this team now that Mitch Moreland is on the A's. And, for him to go into the season feeling really good about himself, that kind of stuff matters. Like with Benintendi, his struggles really got in his head and it started affecting every aspect of his game here. So if Dahlbeck can go into it being like, oh my God, I finished spring training with the most home runs in MLB for the spring, ride that momentum, dude. That's great.
Yeah, I think it's funny because, Felger and Maz always say spring training stats don't matter unless they're terrible. And the managers usually say spring training stats don't matter unless they're great. So it's like, it depends what side you're on. Are you on the
right,
side that's
it counts if it's good and it doesn't count if it's bad.
Exactly. And, it was funny because Cora, even in the beginning of spring training, made a point to say, listen, spring training results, they don't matter. The stats don't matter. 2 weeks later, he's like, look, we're leading the league in home runs. We're leading the league in RBIs. This is great. It's like 2 weeks ago, the stats didn't matter. It's very selective. I think we can play around with them. We can look at past World Series winners who were great or who were terrible in spring training. David Ortiz has a career 200 average in spring training. JD Martinez is pretty bad in spring training usually. It all depends on the player and the situation. But for young players trying to gain some confidence, that's probably the most important. It's probably most important to them, I think. But, so Dahlbeck's a good example of that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that general larger conversation about how much your mental headspace plays into your game, how much it impacts your game. And I still think that that's a conversation that is obviously beginning in sports with the talk about more openness about mental health and struggling. But yeah. I definitely think that feeling good about yourself going into the season, as opposed to feeling blech about yourself going into the season, is good. And it makes an impact. Think about that 13-game road trip on the West Coast that they had to start the 2019 season. And that was just such a bummer. Every single game. And you know what? It impacted them for a while going into that season. That first impression, it matters.
And when you think about the Red Sox, the biggest thing is the starting pitching, right? With, 2019, their starting pitchers didn't look ready. They took this slow approach. And they said, well, this is how we have to do it after the long season the year before. And then what happened? They had a terrible April. Their starting pitchers had an ERA over 5, and it was a complete disaster.
Over 5? It was over 8.
I just looked it up. In April, it was 5.3 because I thought it was that big too. I thought it was 8 or 9. I couldn't believe it was only 5.3.
I just remember Chris Sale after opening day. Wasn't his ERA 80?
Yeah, he was throwing 89 miles an hour. It was a tough April for them, and I think, I think there's a lot of pressure on this team to come out firing a little bit after what happened last year, and they got Alex Cora back now, and when I look at the season, I look at it as if they don't really perform in the first couple months, it's going to kind of turn into full-on rebuild mode. Let's get Duran up here. Let's get Jeter Downs up here. Let's get Tanner Houck back up here. Who else in the minors can come help us? Maybe Thad Ward. If Brian Mata's healthy, can he come help us? Someone like Durbin Feltman. Some of these other young guys, this season has a chance to get young real quickly. If they're not playing well in April and May, well, at that point, why not get the young guys up to get some experience and to turn this into kind of an audition and a chance to build some confidence for some young players? And that's where April, I think, for this team is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think you and I have talked about this a little bit in the past, but this team, I think this is a bridge year for them. I think that they're going to be better than people expect, but I don't think that this is a postseason year for them. But I think 2022 is when you see this team kind of really start to be in contender conversation again. What do you think?
If Chris Sale was healthy, totally different story, right? Or if he was, if he had Tommy John at the end of 2019 instead of in the middle of 2020, totally different story. Because now you have one of the best pitchers in baseball leading your staff. Now you don't need to rely on, healthy Nathan Eovaldi, healthy Garrett Richards, healthy Eduardo Rodriguez. If you get 2 out of 3, you feel pretty good. If you get 1 out of 3, you might even be okay if you have Chris Sale leading the staff, but you don't. And Chris Sale's Tommy John recovery has not been smooth. He had a neck issue that cost him a couple months. He had a great interview with Rob Bradford of EEI the other day where he said he was lazy in his recovery process and Tommy John, and we see what happens. We see what happens with these guys. They can recover in 12 months. They can recover in 2 years. It all depends on the way their body responds and the way that they put in the work. And if Chris Sale's not ready to go by, May, June, which it certainly doesn't look like, it's going to be really hard for this team to win ball games without a starting rotation that feels really solid and comfortable. I have a hard time seeing them even being third in this division. I think the Blue Jays made some really big additions this offseason. They got George Springer. They've got some really good young pitchers coming up. They got Ryu, who's top 5 Cy Young finisher 2 years in a row. They've got good, young, talented players in the middle of the infield with Vlad Guerrero and Kevin Biggio and Bo Bichette. I think the Blue Jays are the third best team in this division, maybe even the second best team, depending how the Rays look. And it's going to be a tough year for the Red Sox to compete with these guys. I think, they got 57 games against three really good teams. And, yeah, they have 19 against the Orioles, but I still look at the Red Sox as kind of a fourth-place team in this division.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the Blue Jays are going to be better than people are talking about. I think that they're a top 2 team in this division. I think that they're better than the Rays, honestly, especially with the Rays getting some injuries, like Nick Anderson yesterday out for a while for the Rays. That's dropped him from my fantasy team, which felt mean, but got to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like the Yankees are not as impressive as people think this year. I'm just like, I feel like they didn't really do anything of note this winter. And, I'm never going to rely on Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton in terms of health, and also just being absolute strikeout machines. Though I will say, I think it was Judge who said he's taken up yoga, and you and I both big proponents of yoga and pliability, a la Tom Brady. Yeah. So that's interesting to note, because I've been saying for years now that the Yankees just bulking up and not working on flexibility, big mistake. Also, I love the Blue Jays. I think they're fun. I like their young core. I'm a huge Ryu fan. I'm rooting for them. Let's talk about the Red Sox starting pitching. You touched on Chris Sale. So our pitching coach, Dave Bush, gave an update on Chris Sale this week that was not super encouraging. He also had COVID this winter, which wasn't talked about for a while, but then he had it. And thankfully, unlike Eduardo Rodriguez, he wasn't super affected by it. He said he didn't really feel that bad, which is good. But yeah, I feel like everyone's talking about Chris Sale coming back as if he'll be back in like early June. Happy birthday to me, Chris Sale, pitching at the beginning of June. I don't think so. At this point, for Dave Bush to come out there and say that Tommy John is typically a 12 to 18 month recovery, which it is, but Sale hasn't even reached his 1-year anniversary of his surgery yet. And I think for Bush to specify the range of 12 to 18 months, I think he's suggesting that Sale will be on the longer end of that recovery.
I'd say, that's another reason where it all depends how good this team is. Because if this team is not looking very good, why is Chris Sale going to push himself? Why is he going to? Why is he going to fight to get back a little earlier than maybe he should, or come back in shorter stints like they did with Evaldi, which didn't work a couple years ago? Obviously a different elbow surgery, but still elbow surgery, to come back in shorter stints out of the bullpen just to get back sooner. Why is he going to do that if the Red Sox are, the fourth place team in the division? It doesn't make a lot of sense, especially with a guy that you have now for the long term. He's only in his early 30s. You're hoping you're going to get a good long career out of Chris Sale leading this pitching staff. There's really no reason for him to push it. So I don't see him coming back before the All-Star break. I think that'd be really tough for that to happen based on what we know about his recovery so far. And because of that, that's the biggest reason why I don't see the playoffs for this team. Now, there's still a lot of reasons to watch this team. There's still a lot of players that can take big steps forward. They got some young players we might see at some point this year. You want to see how some of these signings work out with Garrett Richards, who's got an option for next year if he does well. Kike Hernandez is here for a couple of years. There's still a lot of reasons to watch. I just don't think they're going to be very good.
We talk about baseball now as like such an all or nothing thing. You need to go to the postseason every year. You need to win trophies every year. You need to win your division every year. And I think that that's part of the problem. I mean, obviously, we could talk about problems with Major League Baseball till we're blue in the face. And I'll just leave it at this, that I think it's part of the problem with how we view our sports now, as opposed to just entertainment. It has to be about victory or loss, and there's no in between. And my friend Sully, who hosts Locked on MLB, said something that really stuck with me this offseason. He said, your team doesn't owe you a championship. Your team owes you a summer. Your team owes you the opportunity to go to the ballpark and not know if you're going to win or lose, but know that you're going to get to watch an enjoyable game of baseball where effort and heart is put into the game. And I think that the Red Sox could give fans that this year. And I think that that's honestly at this point for a franchise that has won 4 in 15 years, when you've got a team like Cleveland that hasn't won since 1948. I think that if the Red Sox just look alive this year, just play with heart, are excited to play in front of fans, they give it their best shot. What more should we be asking for at this point? Yes, yes, Mookie Betts should still be here. Jackie Bradley Jr. should still be here. Chris Sale should be healthy. But compared to so many other fan bases, we've had it so good. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't suck when it's bad. And last year was really, really bad. But it means that if they put an enjoyable product out on the field, I'm not even saying a winning product, I'm saying an enjoyable product where they're having fun with it and they're doing their best and they're not looking like they don't want to be there. We should be grateful that we have baseball. When we go into Fenway Park next week, I'm just going to be happy to be there. I'm going to bawl my eyes out just getting to walk into Fenway Park. I don't really care if they win or lose. Obviously, I would like it if they win, but I'm just going to be glad to be there.
And that's certainly admirable, and I think that's great. If you can take that perspective, you're going to be a lot happier and you're going to enjoy the season a lot more. But I also think that there's a large conglomerate, especially in Boston, that say, hey, we're paying $170 a ticket. We're paying $20 a beer. We're paying $70 for parking. Why isn't this team better? We're a big market team. We spend a lot of money as fans on this team, and we expect better than just be happy to be there. And so that's, I think that's kind of the beautiful part about Boston sports is that we don't really give teams a free pass. That if you stink, you're going to hear about it, especially given the money that fans spend. So
maybe I would feel differently if I had to pay for the tickets.
Right? Yeah, if you were paying for season tickets and the exorbitant prices, you'd probably be a little upset. So I think it's great that baseball is back. It's great that, after spring training where we only could watch 10 games, without it, really only like 2 or 3 reporters down there to tell us what's going on, it's been hard to connect to this team. It's been hard to connect to the sport. And, baseball really needs to get going. They need to avoid any COVID shutdowns. It's a big year for the sport, especially with the CBA up at the end of the year. There could be some nasty negotiations in the postseason. They need to have a good year. They need to have an exciting year as a sport. So as long as the Red Sox, like you said, give us a summer, give us something to pay attention to, don't fall out of contention quickly, have some good players, have a good product in the field, it'll be better than last year, that's for sure.
BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. With Major League Baseball coming back this week, they have updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine and brand new odds on who will win the World Series, who is going to be the Cy Young, who is going to be the MVP, who will hit the most home runs. They have NBA, college basketball, NHL, awards, TV shows, reality TV. They have real-time updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine, and they've got you covered. And in addition to those real-time updated odds and props on all of those things that I mentioned, BetOnline has you covered for all the news, scores, and odds too. So it's the best place to place your bets, and it's free to sign up. Head to their website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
This episode is brought to you by HP Plus. In a world full of smart devices, shouldn't your printer be smart too? It is with HP Plus. These printers know when they're running low, so you always get the ink you need delivered right when you need it. Plus, you save up to 50% on ink, so you can print whatever you want, as much as you want, anytime you want. Huh, that is pretty smart. Get 6 free months of instant ink when you choose HP Plus. Conditions apply. Visit hp.com/smart for details.
We've been telling you about Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market for a while now. Built Bar is an amazing low-calorie, low-sugar, high-protein, high-fiber, amazing tasting protein bar with 100% chocolate on all bars. These bars are unlike any other protein bar you are going to find. They are soft and easy to chew. They've got amazing flavors. And right now, they are doing their own Built Bar Madness bracket. You can go to BuiltBar.com or go to bar_built on Twitter to vote for your favorite Built Bars and find out which Built Bar will be crowned the best of them all. And in addition, you can use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order. That is LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order at BuiltBar.com, and check back to see who won today's matchup and who will become the best tasting Built Bar of them all. The Locked On MLB Division Preview Series continues today on Locked On MLB. Every episode from now until March 31st features in-depth looks at each team in every division. It's all on Locked On MLB Podcasts, so follow Locked On MLB on the Odyssey app or wherever you get podcasts. So this is your second to last episode of Locked On Red Sox before the season starts. I cannot believe that we are finally going to have baseball at Fenway Park with fans in the stands. I can't wait to walk into Fenway Park on Thursday. God willing, it does not rain. I have so many emotions about being back at the ballpark and just being with other people, even from a distance again, like not having to watch these games on a stream and just getting to see my favorite team in my favorite place in the entire world. I literally went and bought waterproof mascara today because I know that I'm going to cry my eyes out. It's just so special. And this year away, over a year now, since I've been inside the ballpark, has made me appreciate it even more. I mean, every time I walk into that ballpark before, I always knew how special it was, and I always appreciated it. But I don't think I will ever take it for granted again. And I know that none of you will either. I mean, this time, apart from things that we just thought of as regular everyday life things, like being able to go get a coffee with a friend, go on an airplane, hug people, smile at people, without a mask on, go to a sporting event. This time has really shown me how special all of those things are. And I know that being at Fenway is, pun intended, going to really drive that point home for me, because I grew up going to this ballpark every single summer and I sat in the same seats every single year. Not being able to do that unexpectedly last year, I really realized how much of my life and how much of my being centered on being there and feeling like a part of it. And, not to be cheesy and quote fever pitch, but I'm going to be cheesy and I'm going to quote fever pitch. Ben Reitman says, I fell in love with this when I was 6 because I didn't have anything else. I mean, I had other things, but I fell in love with this when I was a baby. He says, I like being part of something that's bigger than me. And then Drew Barrymore says, you're romantic. You can love under the best and worst conditions. And you have to be like that to be a Red Sox fan. But not being able to be at the ballpark this year was hard. And I'm rambling and I'm sorry, but I can't believe that in less than 2 days, I get to walk into Fenway Park and see that green monster and sit in those uncomfortable seats and sing Sweet Caroline and watch my favorite team play the game that we all love. I am so grateful and I can't wait. And I will be really excited to take you guys along with the ride. I'm going to be putting up video content on Locked On Red Sox on Twitter. I'm going to be going live on the Locker Room app, and I will be putting TikToks up, and I will be doing all the content. I will be doing the most. So thank you guys so much for listening. We are 2 days away from opening day. I am so flippin' excited. I can't even breathe, basically. Thank you guys so much for sticking it out last year with me throughout that awful 2020 season, throughout the off season this year, this really long winter that felt like it was never going to end. But here we are. Baseball's almost here. It's so close. It's so close. So thank you guys so much. This has been your Tuesday, March 30th episode of Locked On Red Sox. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at GFSTARR1. You can follow Locked On Red Sox on Twitter at LO_Red Sox. Locked On MLB is at Locked On MLB Pods. Wear a mask, stay safe, and as always, and in 2 days at Fenway Park with fans in the stands, go Red Sox.